Welcome back to Section 247's The Goal Line Stand, our 32 for 32 NFL preview series. I am Michael Lipinski. I am joined over there by Brett Halpern, and we are here discussing, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Andy Reid, head coach of the Super Bowl champion Andy Reid, and his Kansas City Chiefs. A few housekeeping notes here before we get started. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at GL Stand Show. If you are enjoying these here preview series, click the subscribe button and tell a friend, leave a review, help us grow this thing. We're going to continue to do more and more video things that everyone has been asking for. So let's get right to it here. The Kansas City Chiefs, 2019, 12-4, and you see it right there. Super Bowl champions. Congratulations to Andy Reid. Look, I don't harbor any ill feelings as an Eagles fan. I still think Andy Reid was the greatest coach in Eagles history, regardless of the fact that he didn't win a Super Bowl championship in Philadelphia. He did it for Kansas City, and man, there's a lot of barbecue joints and cheeseburger joints that were happy about it.
Yeah, look, it's funny. I think as a Giant fan, Andy Reid sort of made my life miserable for several years. And, I am incredibly happy for him, his family. He's been through a lot. He's a good man. And I think that's the sentiment shared by the overwhelming majority of the football community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Literally, when they won, everyone was just like, "Congratulations, Andy Reid!" And I'm happy for him. In general, I am a Giant fan, but you hear even positive things about that fan base. I mean, it's an intense fan base, but you don't hear the negatives associated with other teams and whatnot. So I was happy for him. It had been 50 years since they won. And, look, they are, and we're going to talk about it, they're in a position to win a lot more.
Yeah, so, and you mentioned the fan base. It is on my short list of NFL stadiums and fans that I want to go and watch a game. I want to go watch a game as a representative of my fan base, not just going to go. And we're going to have a whole show on that. We can have a whole top 5 on that of our 5 bucket lists in the National Football League.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one that we're going to get to in the off season, and knock on wood, which I'm doing right now. Hopefully that off season is much, the actual off season and not like this fall.
Yeah. Way down the road.
Exactly.
So let's get into it. Not a whole lot of movement here from the Chiefs, but let's get into it. The acquisitions, the opt-outs, and the departures.
Yeah. I think it was, in some ways, a quiet offseason for the Chiefs. I mean, except they basically, they did, invest almost essentially $400 million or whatever into for Patrick Mahomes. He could probably buy a good section of the state of Missouri or the state of Kansas if he'd like,
or the whole Midwest, probably.
Probably, yeah.
People out there though, but we talked about that on the Goal Line Stand. While it is a big number. Looking at it, 10 years, $400 million, that's a big number, but it is a very team-friendly deal.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to that level.
It works for all sides, and that's what I think is the great part about it. And you've wrapped up what might be the most talented quarterback and again, remember what I'm saying here, the most talented quarterback in the history of the NFL. One of. I'm not saying, look, he still had, and he already has a tremendous resume, but he still has to continue to do that to have some of the other titles that I think he wants, in terms of GOAT and all those things. I'm not saying he's not even in that conversation yet. You can't be, heading into your 4th year. Nevertheless, so in terms of the other acquisitions, 2 of them were actually from my New York Giants, Antonio Hamilton and Mike Remmers. I think that the the general theme here is pretty much depth. They went and they got depth, in various areas of the offense and defense here. Mike Remmers, who can play multiple positions along the offensive line. Ricky Seals-Jones is, I think, was a really good pickup for them because it provides more of a receiving threat from this. Actually, he's going to be the third tight end, I believe. He probably challenges for the second tight end spot. But behind Travis Kelce, I think that was a good pickup. Came from Cleveland. DeAndre Washington coming from he came from the Oakland Raiders, but they are now the Las Vegas Raiders. I guess that's how you would call it because
he's a former Raider.
He's a former Raider. Yes, thank you. I'm getting it. Yeah, I'm getting into my brain there. So, in terms of departures, I think I think Dustin Kolka was actually a good punter. But everyone, they'll find another punter. Kendall Fuller is a good cornerback, but they picked up. But they have other guys on their team that are ready to step up. They lost Steven Wisniewski, who was a former Eagle, Super Bowl champion winning Eagle, and Reggie Ragland and Emmanuel Agba. There's some notable names, but they have players in position to step up each of the guys who departed. In terms of the COVID opt-outs, I would say not as devastating as perhaps the Patriots or, yesterday we talked about Jawan James. But Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, that's a very interesting story. He's the starting guard for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he is also a doctor. He attended McGill University, then attended medical school in Canada. And I give him so much credit. He's opting out because he does not want to abandon the patients that he is helping to treat up in Canada.
Yeah, that's a real class.
Yeah,
that's a real classy thing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And I guess that's just the best way to put it. People were giving him crap for it because everybody has an opinion on this, and we don't go into that here. But to say that people are more important than football right now from a health standpoint, and I'm going to go do my job, is pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, I'll get into it. I think if you gave, I think if you give any of these guys crap, I think it's BS. But in particular, this guy who is, says he doesn't want to abandon his patients, and really, what is one of the most important things going on right now are frontline workers and the medical community in particular. So, I give this guy all the credit in the world, and I. As much as, you wish people luck in their athletic endeavors, I really wish him the best of luck in his professional endeavors here so that he can help as many people as possible. The next guy, Damian Williams, that's their Super Bowl hero who rushed for, well over 100 yards. I actually thought that there's definitely an argument can be made that he was the MVP last year of the Super Bowl, excuse me. Because, Mahomes did not have his best game. He made the clutch throws when needed, but Damian Williams had a really nice game. Had 2 touchdowns, had the long run to seal it. Again, it's an argument.
You always give the MVP to the quarterback.
Of course, that's why Peyton Manning got the MVP as opposed to Dominic Rhodes. Look,
this kind of does affect the running back room. Now, granted, again, we've discussed it at length on the main podcast and on this here program. Running backs can be found. And Andy Reid is a guy, as a coach, he has the history of it where he finds these guys and he'll use 3, 4 of them at one given time.
Absolutely. He has always done that. I think if you look quickly to the left there, one of the names I mentioned, DeAndre Washington, that helps. And a name we're also going to talk about in the next slide, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, their first-round pick. That's going to offset it. But nevertheless, Damian Williams is a good running back and definitely played very well once the Chiefs got rid of Kareem Hunt the year before. So that hurts. Lucas Niang was actually, we'll see in the next slide, I think it was a 3rd or 4th round pick as an offensive lineman from TCU. Definitely intriguing lineman. I think he needs a year or 2 to further almost like grow into his body. So I guess from a football perspective, you could be a little disappointed only because he's not going to have the opportunity to work with the team, which is
I was going to
something.
say, I
Yeah,
don't know that we discussed this on the Goal Line Stand, the main podcast. When you opt out, obviously there we've discussed the 350K and the 150K that you have to pay back.
yeah.
You are completely shutting yourself from team activity, correct? Like, can you go on and Zoom a meeting? I don't know. We've never really talked about it. I don't know that we looked into it.
We definitely didn't look into it. It's something we should look into. I'm guessing no. I think because look, it's different than it's different than being put on IR. Guys who are on IR are around the team, but because you're opting out, I think, and technically you're now like off the books in terms of
Right. I
payment.
guess you took that buyout. You got it's time to go home, go work by yourself. Then that hurts. That hurts from you can get a guy quote unquote red shirt
Yeah,
as a lineman. That's fine, but he needs to be around everyone. This is going to hurt there.
yeah. Either way, this definitely hurts this guy's development. But like I said, we all have all these players have reasons to opt out, and I understand. And I think he'll be okay. But I do think he's a promising player to look out for in year 2 or 3 of his career. So
Let's
those are
move
the
on to
opt
it.
outs.
We were mentioning draft picks.
Yeah.
So here we go. The draft for the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. What's your take on it? To me, it was very much it was okay. You won a Super Bowl. You're not, and you're built to win maybe many. We'll get to that here in a little bit. It was very much a typical kind of Andy Reid crew type draft, finding guys that are going to fit different spots.
Yeah, look, it was kind of a ho hum draft. I think a lot of experts uh, gave it actually a very poor grade. Anywhere from a C or a D. I first off, I think to completely grade a draft, you need several years. But I'll tell you one thing, particularly in light of the fact that Damian Williams opted out, they're sure glad they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who really fits perfectly into what Kansas City is going to be doing because he's also a very good receiving threat. And
Yeah.
also their second
He's
round
the
pick.
perfect guy for that offense.
Yeah,
They love
exactly.
to use the screen game, the quick passing game. That is the typical Andy Reid West Coast system.
Yeah. I mean, this guy, I wouldn't call him Brian West. He's thicker than Brian Westbrook and slower, but very talented player. And also, look, their second round pick, Willie Gay Jr., is going to step right in and start at linebacker. So to me, I don't see how you could really fault a draft class when the first 2 guys are going to step in right away and start. Obviously, as we just mentioned, there's Lucas Niang, who I still think is going to be a valuable player for them down the line. And the other guys are just sort of depth. And look, they drafted a guy named Bo Pete. How bad could it be?
Yeah. If you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I don't think that you're going to have to look back on this and say, that 2020 draft was a real disappointment. I think you're going to be okay. You get 1 or 2 guys out of it, and what you have set up, and we're going to get to that here as we talk about our 4 key questions for the Chiefs. The draft that's not the end of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get into it here. Are the Chiefs the biggest favorite to repeat in recent memory? You go first, and then I'll follow up off of you because it's a great question.
So,
outside of the cheating Patriots,
well, I think the Chiefs benefit from the fact that the Patriots dynasty is no longer, right? So there's already one clear team that is not a favorite. The NFC, I'm not going to call them weak, but you have the Niners. There's other teams that are good. It might be one of the strong because look, think backwards, right? The Eagles had every reason to think that they had a shot to repeat, but you had it was a close game against the Patriots. Yeah, and the Patriots were there.
Right. I mean, if you're asking me over the past 20 years, who can I say, oh, they won a Super Bowl? Are they going to repeat? There might have been an argument for the Colts at one point.
Yeah.
They were just around. Obviously, the Patriots.
Seahawks, maybe. But
Well, they could,
again, and but
well,
and
if
then
Pete Carroll would have ran the ball, yeah.
yeah,
But that's
but
neither.
again, back in the, so up until a few years ago, you always had a Peyton Manning team and you always had a Tom Brady team, so that was an issue. They kind of, this is also, it's good. Timing is everything, and right now there's no, I think most people would tell you their biggest threat is going to be the Ravens, and it makes sense, and they're in the same conference. But I think they might be the biggest favorite to repeat. Reason
So,
I haven't looked up the odds.
No, we have
Compared
no,
them.
we have, I don't have the odds, and we can look it up in a few seconds here. But I would agree with you that this is the shift. The shift has been made from the New England Patriot era to the Kansas City Chief era. This
Yeah.
is a scenario where you have the coach, you have the
Yep.
quarterback who is going to be team friendly, who
Yep.
is willing to work with everybody and not be a self-centered jackass. They have all the weapons in the world. You have a scenario here where for the foreseeable future, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be in the equation.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I know we've said in the previous preview videos that we're not taking COVID into account, but if you take some elements of it in terms of the off season, in terms of the fact, I think that teams with new coaches are going to struggle. They have the exact same coaches from last year. They pretty much have the same starters from last year, so they're just going to hit the ground running.
Right. It's a continuation of what they were doing.
Exactly. So
and actually, there's always the argument when you play in the Super Bowl, because your season is longer, your off season is shorter.
yeah,
Because of the way this is all kind of went down, teams aren't out there doing OTAs and all these different things. It might actually help them get a little bit healthier versus in years past where it's 6 weeks after the Super Bowl, you're going right back into draft and OTA mode.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the way that there's no preseason games, it gives them a rest physically. That other teams they might get rusty. For them,
Right.
I think it's just giving them much needed rest.
Well, that'll parlay into question number 2. Is there a weakness on this offense?
So I would say, particularly in light of the opt-outs, that the two weaknesses are offensive line depth and running back depth.
I would agree with you there. I'm actually surprised Stefan Wisniewski didn't find a way back.
Yeah.
After he left, especially with the opt-out. He's the kind of guy that can just slide in, and he's a good depth guy. He's a guy that can start when need be. He's a very good piece to a puzzle. I am always going to and I praise the coach at the top of the program.
Yeah.
But that being said, Andy Reid can get in Andy Reid's head and in his way sometimes.
Absolutely.
I think he has learned from his past mistakes. He has different players around him that are maybe, it seems like, a little bit more willing to do different things. If there was one liability, it could be the head coach who just won a Super Bowl and is by far a Hall of Fame.
I mean, perhaps, look, another benefit is the fact that Eric Bieniemy didn't get a coaching job.
That is true. Which is
and didn't go
play.
It's not right. He should have, whether in the NFL or a high-level Power 5 job, not just taking his alma mater's position at Colorado. But either way, I think that, again, it's also nice if your weaknesses are depth issues in a certain way, because it means if you're healthy, you're just going to rock and roll.
Exactly. So let's talk about that. Is their defense a liability, or is the offense just so good that it really doesn't matter? Does the defense get overshadowed because the offense is so good?
So I think it is particularly, you got to remember, last year was the first year under Steve Spagnuolo. And it was actually very similar to when Steve Spagnuolo first took over the Giant defense. They struggled a little bit at first. He has a very complex system. The guy's, Spagnuolo's a Mensa guy. He's incredibly high IQ. And the one knock on him, so to speak, is that his defenses are very complicated. It takes a little while. That defense got increasingly better as the season went on. I would rank them as like somewhere in the 13 to 18 range as a defense. I don't think they're a liability per se, but look, if they, but you're comparing them with an offense that is a generational offense. So I think that's kind of the issue there.
Right. I agree with you. I like Spagnuolo. I've always been
Love
a
him,
fan.
love him.
I think that there's many places he should have had a job and he didn't, but that's neither here nor there. We can get to that at a later point. Let's move on to it here. Aside from a Patrick Mahomes injury, the reason the Chiefs don't repeat is what?
Well,
Loaded question. I mean, I have my answer. You want me to go first?
Go for it.
All right. So I already mentioned it. Aside from a Mahomes injury, the only reason that the Chiefs don't repeat is Andy Reid got in his own way. And there's just sometimes I even watched it as afar, watching Kansas City games where it's like bad clock management, questionable calls. What is going on here? Typical Andy Reid. They have so many weapons that I don't know. It's like a track meet. Who can stop them? They can only stop themselves. It's such a cliche, canned answer, but it is true. I think if you have everybody healthy, as long as Andy Reid did what Andy Reid did a year ago, there might be, I don't know about a parade, but there might be another celebration in Kansas City.
Yeah. Well, it's also tough to, guess. I mean, I do worry a little bit about the interior of that offensive line with respect to depth. The other thing, and even though I just said I don't think the defense is a liability, I believe the way to beat them is you physically have to beat up the Kansas City Chiefs and just land body blow after body blow, old school, control the clock, ball control offense. Tennessee was doing it. They were up 10 points in the AFC. That's the other thing. Each of their playoff wins last year, they were down. I mean, they were down 24 against the Texans, 10 against the Titans. They were down 10 against the Niners in the fourth quarter. And I think Patrick Mahomes was rattled in the Super Bowl. So I think you need an uber physical team that is just going to smack them in the mouth. I think there's a few teams that might fit the bill, but in the end of the day, the Chiefs have so many weapons. If one of those teams screws up just once, it doesn't matter. It's game over. That's why they're the favorites to win.
And we will give you our official prediction as we close out this 32 for 32 series when we do our big NFL kickoff preview. If you are enjoying this here program, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell a wrestler. We are moving on tomorrow to the AFC South and the Fighting Shad Khans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. From there, we will go to the Colts, Titans, Texans, and we're going to move on to the AFC East. 32 teams in 32 days, our preview series. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at the Goal Line Stand Show.